Wormhole's going live. 3, 2.
This is The Wormhole, presented by Team FearWorm. Interviews, education, anything and everything to do with Halloween and haunted houses. And of course, marketing.
Well, hello everybody. Happy Friday. It is again the FearWorm Wormhole, happening, as it does every other Friday. But I'm so excited about today's show because we're going to get a little wacky with some creative talk and an awesome haunted house out of California. But to have that conversation, I want to bring in another FearWormer that everybody knows, Ernest Corder, who I'm sure is going to have some interesting points of view on this haunted house.
Hey, everybody.
Ernest, how are you?
I'm excited to be here, man. This is gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, well, without further ado, I think we should just jump right into this. I know we have a lot of ground to cover, but I want to introduce Mr. Joshua Grannell. Hopefully I am saying his last name right, from Terror Vault in San Francisco.
Hello.
Hi, Joshua. How are you?
Good, and you did say it correctly.
Yeah, I've been on a roll lately of saying people's names correctly. So I'm like,
you just said that out loud, so now you're gonna botch it.
I know. The next one is gonna be like horrible.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on here. We so many of our haunts seem to be so Midwest, East, Ohio, Pennsylvania. So many of our clients there, and we do have them scattered around the country, and a few out, West Coast. But I think there are a lot of people that would like to get that perspective. Trans world is like where a lot of people have connected and they know each other from, but it's too long a haul from California. It's
right.
So don't quite see as many people out there. So excited for people to get a different, maybe a different perspective. Maybe they don't know you guys yet. So I'm excited to share that.
Great. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell us first, so people who don't know you, who are you? Tell us what you do, and then we'll get into Terror Vault to talk about that as well.
Sure. Well, I wear a lot of different wigs. I'm sitting here as Joshua, but probably in the horror world, I'm better known as my drag alter ego, Peaches Christ. And as Peaches, I've celebrated cult movies and horror films since the mid '90s, and I put on live events celebrating these films, namely my Midnight Mass movie series, which is now a podcast. And I also made a horror movie starring Natasha Lyonne, and that's being re-released this June. It's coming out. So it'll be a big streaming announcement is coming soon, and Severin is putting out a Blu-ray with all sorts of extra features. So that's exciting. So that's where most people know me kind of in the horror universe, but my passion for haunted attractions has been since I was a tiny kid growing up in Maryland and going to the Morbid Manor in Ocean City, or Bill Tracy's Dark Ride in Ocean City, the haunted house. And so I've always wanted to do a haunted attraction. And a few years ago, I met this incredible partner, David Flower, I was doing a run of shows in Provincetown in Massachusetts. And I was doing a parody of The Shining. And David was there, and everyone kept saying, "Oh my God, Peaches, you have to meet David. We got to get Joshua and David together." And so I met David and started looking at his production design and looking at the haunts he was doing in Provincetown. And it was so inspiring that I'm like, if we take sort of me as a writer, director, producer, and you as a production designer, producer, although we overlap with everything, but if we could make a great partnership, how about I try to get something for us in San Francisco? And he said, "Good luck. I've already tried in San Francisco. It's impossible." And I said, so have I, but the two of us together, we're going to make it happen. And so I I went to the San Francisco Mint building, the company that manages the actual old historic Mint building. And we put together a proposal, and we created a partnership with them and built a company called Into the Dark Productions. And that's the company that produces Terror Vault. And so now we have actually a year-round home at the San Francisco Mint, where we have a chunk of the building that we maintain and use year-round. And then for the shows themselves, we bleed into the rest of the building, depending. So we're part pop-up and starting to be part year-round.
Yeah. Is that building, did you have to do much work to it, or was it ready to roll?
I mean, it is. So the building is very, very historic. It's one of the few buildings that survived the 1906 earthquake. And so the city is very interested in its history. So, I mean, both. I would say that the building has not been super well maintained. And part of that is because the city is going to turn it eventually into a giant, beautiful museum of San Francisco.
Looks like a museum from the front of it. Yeah.
Yeah, of San Francisco history. But they haven't done that yet. So we know that we're there temporarily, and we actually, we could be there for 5 more years or 20 more years. We don't know, but we know that the building's not ours. And so in some ways, the fact that it hadn't been remodeled or maintained, especially the rooms that we've taken over, of course, for our show, that's quite all right.
Well, I would like these old buildings are being used for that, right? I mean, when you think about the haunted attractions, are the one group that comes in. And, if somebody wanted to turn it into condos, they'd have to drop $10 million on it. You come in and you're like, leave the crust on the walls, please.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Perfect. And not to mention, like for me, I feel, because obviously I'm not, haunted attraction young demo 14 to 30-year-old, right? But put me in a historic building or a place that seems haunted anyway, or the old hospital or the place with the history. I was talking to somebody, an outdoor haunt, and they were looking for like some old field, like old farm, that's been, this got a little mystique, a little scare to it. It's always a great opportunity to do something like that. Plus people just want to see an old building like that, right?
Yeah.
They've never been in it, and it kind of gives them an opportunity to go check it out.
Absolutely, that's been part of what sells tickets, is people literally living in San Francisco, and our event was the first time they had access to the interior of the building.
Mm-hmm. I would like to play this video. It's about 1:30, but it's a great introduction into Terror Vault. It is the 2021 trailer for The Immortal Reckoning, which is the show that happened at Terror Vault. So without further ado, I am going to play this video.
I invite you to the San Mint building this fall to witness a piece of culture and history never seen before by the public. This Book of Shadows contains the spell for opening a portal. Give me permission to transcend!
Let the show begin.
The only way out is through.
You don't smell right. I should drain you right here.
Why won't anyone adopt me?
Give me the stone, and I shall return the child.
Whoever replaces all 3 stones inside a stone tablet shall inherit a power great enough to unleash the immortal reckoning.
Surrender the child!
I will snap this thing in half. The immortal reckoning shall be mine.
So that was a lot. And I think that only gives you the smallest taste of what Terror Vault is. So
Yes.
I think on that, Joshua, tell us, what is Terror Vault? What is the Immortal Reckoning? What is that?
So Terror Vault ended up being kind of our overall brand in some ways. The first couple years we did call the show Terror Vault, but what we realized is that we were producing different stories and different even events and components to the event, and Terror Vault was really what people came to know us as. So in 2021, especially because we had the pandemic to give us more time to think, because we did not do a show in 2020. We ended up doing something else, but it was nowhere near the amount of work that a big show is. We decided that it made more sense for Terror Vault to present these individual shows or experiences. So The Immortal Reckoning was a new show, and we do a full script. I write a script. David and I create like an outline, a story. We build stuff. We work with a lot of actors who are, not just haunt actors, but also, theater actors. We work with a lot of drag performers, obviously. And so we typically do more of like a play with a beginning, a middle, and an end, but also all of the sort of scares and horror stuff that you would expect from a haunted attraction. So it's kind of like David and I decided, let's create the event we want to go to, and in part, so it's part immersive theater and part, haunted house.
Did you have an inspiration for doing that? Had you seen that, or was that just kind of your thing?
I think in a lot of ways, we would go to these things, growing up. Both David and I loved haunted attractions as kids. And so we would go to these things growing up. And obviously, in many ways, I think haunts don't get the credit they deserve for being the first, versions of immersive theater, throughout history. It's like, look, these haunted attractions, they were doing what you call immersive, this buzzword, they were doing it for years, but they get dismissed, often by the fan communities, as being carny or whatever. But we loved theater, and we loved movies, and we loved haunted houses. And it was sort of like, let's just unapologetically mash up what we like and try to do a story around it. So we were both inspired by things like, Morbid Manor, as well as Sleep No More in New York, where it's a proper multi-million-dollar immersive installation, with fine actors and things. So I would say that we took inspiration from different places and then mashed it up to kind of create what we wanted to do.
Can you explain your event a little bit? Like, how long does it last when somebody goes through it? How long does this last? And like, what's the process? Take if you're willing to share that, kind of how it works people through the.
Sure. So it definitely, well, you get to the Mint, which is, of course, this fantastic old building. And I'll take you through what the Immortal Reckoning looked like. You're then processed through, a box office and all of the normal rigmarole. Of course, this past year we had all of the COVID stuff going on. So, there's a little bit of a process getting in, and then there's a step and repeat, and it's very beautiful and grand before you go downstairs. And when you go downstairs in the actual vaults, which were the real vaults where a third of the country's gold was once stored. So they're these crazy industrial looking brick, dark stone rooms in the building. We built something called Fangbang. Our event is 21 and over. And part of the reason for that is that we do a full immersive bar experience. So we did a giant 80s new wave goth bar with vampires. We had every night we had actors working that bar who had a storyline, and every hour on the hour, a different vampire would do a performance on a cabaret stage, and the vampires would be pulling you into secret. If you were, we basically took inspiration from Terror Behind the Walls and implemented the red glow necklace. So folks that opted in for more interactivity wore a red glow necklace, which then allowed the vampires or any of the actors to know that these people were up for more interactivity. So a lot of times, if you were wearing the red glow necklace, vampires might pull you into another room. They might perform a scene for you. We had all these sort of hidden places with scary little moments. And yeah, there was a dance floor. There was, obviously alcohol. And if it was
It was a
busy,
huge hit this year too, right? I
big,
mean,
it was,
social media was killer for it. The photos you had,
yeah, it was very well received. Thank God. We really needed that after taking a year off. And then you start the show. You could come to the bar and just go to the bar. We also have something called the Creep Shop, where we do a whole gift shop of cool, spooky stuff. So you can come to that and not do the show. But when you do the show, you have a separate ticket, and then you go through the show, and it's almost an hour long. The show from beginning to end. And that's a whole adventure that takes you through another part of the building. And that's really where all the storytelling happens. And it's a show, and it has scare moments and mazes, but it also has scenes, and it's outrageous. There's a lot of nudity, there's a lot of sexuality, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of us pushing the boundaries of what makes you uncomfortable. One
second, I'm gonna buy a ticket right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're wearing a red necklace, we may shock you. You may be force fed something, and this is all while the storytelling is happening. So it's something we learned a lot about actually doing it, because neither of us had done anything quite like this. So every year we dial it in a little bit better.
Who came to this? Who's the audience that ended up coming? Like,
that's a good question.
Were they like dressed up and crazy? I mean, because this isn't like, hey, I'm going down to the haunted house, let me buy a ticket and walk through for 20 minutes. This is a different kind of experience. I mean, I know, looking at the numbers, people came from pretty good ways away even to see it.
Yeah, and I think because it's 21 and over, it's not and because it's San Francisco, and because it's at the Mint Building, and because of the ticket price, we have to really sell it to, and nothing's wrong with teenagers. Don't get me wrong, love teenagers, but this isn't the haunted attraction that's, maybe geared towards a teen audience, and with a quicker push through. It's definitely an adult audience who drink and want a more adult experience, and maybe a little bit more of a story. Although we don't want them drinking too much. That's the other thing when you have a bar at your show. It's kind of like, oh God, we don't want them in that bar too long. It affects the show. But yeah, I would say that it's a pretty wide net, and it's not necessary. I would say that there's a portion of the audience that is my Peaches Christ audience, but definitely a much wider net than I get with the Peaches shows. I think with the Peaches stuff, it's more of a specific niche audience. And this is a much wider audience. And I mean, and we've had people come who look like they should be in the show, meaning they show up looking like monsters, right. As well as, one night we had a group who were in all black tie, and we do a whole concierge experience where if you want, you can pay more money, and we'll put up a private room with a private bartender and give you an entire exclusive kind of VIP experience. And so these guests had done this, and we didn't know who they were. And they came through the show wearing tuxedos, wearing gowns, high heels, which we do not recommend. And find out later on Twitter that it was Jason Blum, of Blumhouse.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, who had had thrown this private party and brought his party through Terror Vault, and then he tweeted about it, that he survived Terror Vault and he loved it, and so it really could be anyone, and sometimes we don't even know who the guests are.
Mm-hmm. Well, the theater angle of it is so much. I mean, there is acting in every haunted attraction, right? A level,
yes, of course,
acting, but this is taking that to a way above, the level, which I actually love, and I wish more events would get into that. We've talked to a lot of events, so that finding employees this year is like probably number one struggle that everybody's thinking about. And so we've talked about, reach out to the local junior college acting troupe, or the, what other kind of groups can you get involved, because it is an experience. It is a chance for those actors or actor hopefuls to get some experience, in front of people. And yours takes it to that level where you really are portraying a character and, lines and, the theater. So I think
it's definitely a wide range where, it's like as a director, I'll kind of try to figure out where best to place you. There are certainly performers who are best suited for jump scares and creating a very scary, creepy moment. And maybe that's what you would consider more of your traditional haunt acting. But do not dismiss it. That is not easy. There are plenty of stage actors who are like really well trained who show up and they're not able to do that as well. So everyone has a different skill set, and not everyone can do everything well. So I really try to figure out who's better at delivering a scene and a moment and dialogue and learning a script versus someone who's maybe better suited for creepy improv. We have a lot of stopgap scenes, what we call stopgap scenes, where the actors actually have variations of a script, and those actors work with me to create a 1-minute scene, a 2-minute scene, a 3-minute scene, a 5-minute scene, because what they're really doing is listening for a sound cue that's behind them. And what we don't want is the audience to realize that we've actually stalled the show. So whenever the show pauses or stops, because we're monitoring the flow, that's all under the control of actors. And the actors are actually the people that are making this magic happen. So there's these, and then we have scenes where the actors cannot deviate at all from their dialogue because they have exposition. This is storytelling. They have to say these things. Sometimes they're even communicating with a cue lab set of cues where either there's a tech person in the room hidden behind the scenes, hitting cues, or there's another actor in the scene secretly pushing a button, and that button is cueing. And so those actors have to be almost like robots in order to keep the show going. So it's an interesting thing. Some scenes are exactly the same amount of time every single time, and then we have these sort of fluid stopgap scenes that are kind of massaging the flow of the audience.
It's so different than your typical haunted house, because your haunted house may have their own tricks to stop people, like when it's going too slow or it's moving too fast or whatever. But you have to, because if you don't, you have lines to deliver, you have very specific, and it's a story from beginning to end, like a play, right? It has to have.
Joshua, my question for you, a lot of people who own or run haunted houses that are watching right now may be hearing this and thinking, wow, your throughput must be really low. What do you do? Like, what do you handle if all of a sudden on a Saturday night you have 2,000 people show up?
We wouldn't. That is one of the challenges. And certainly one of our challenges is how to better monetize this event. Because the downside is you cannot run a show like this and get 2,000 people through in a satisfying way a night. So we are very jealous of those haunts that are able to do that in many ways. But what we do, of course, is we adjust the ticket price, so it's not a $20 ticket. It's a $70, $80 ticket price point, because you are getting this fully immersive theatrical experience. It is a night out at the theater in many ways. And because we have the bar experience on either side of it, you could really come to the show and spend a couple hours there easy, and be entertained the whole time. But we're not able to do that. So we have to sacrifice those sorts of numbers in order to maintain the integrity of what we want to do, which is theater.
It also would be really hard to just say, let's do this 6 nights a week or something too, because you can't have this rotating group of actors that changes every night,
Yeah. And I learned that, one thing that might help us is that because I am, a performer, I am able to, the first year I was in the show, like as a featured actor, and I did every single night. I did every single show. Peaches' big scene was me coming down in this freight elevator that we decorated. It was a very Rocky Horror moment, and, smoke cascading out of it. And I was this satanic priestess and, did this whole thing. But it was actually really great for me because I got to really experience the pure and utter hell that it is being an actor in one of these shows. Like I was, after 25 years of performing, I wasn't ready to go back into the trenches and do something as hard or as challenging as this. Now, granted, I was also co-producing the show and writing and directing, and David and I were, being very audacious about what we thought we could pull off. But it was great for me, and I recommend any producers who haven't yet done so that they work an entire shift doing what they're asking their actors to do, because it really will affect your perspective and the way that you treat actors. So one thing that we do, I think, pretty well is really take care of the actors. We recognize that it is hard. We go through a series of orientations and workshops and really try as hard as we can to prepare them for how hard it is. And like you say, Ernest, we learned the hard way. We did one, I think the first year we did one run where it was 8 nights in a row, like the week around Halloween. And we only had really one set of actors, and never, ever again would I do that. I mean, we had people dropping, literally, physically, and so we certainly have learned from making mistakes. And, every year we sort of massage it. So what we're doing now is less shows and trying to sell as many, fill those shows as densely as possible with our audience to protect the energy of the actors.
Yeah. So what's in store this year? What's changing? What's going on?
So it's a new show.
I don't even think talked about this. I don't even know what it is yet.
Well, it's called The Summoning. And
I got that much.
Yeah. So it's called The Summoning. And it's definitely another adventure. I would say that for our core fans, what we hope to do is to deliver a new story, year after year. But keep all of the sort of delicious elements that make our shows unique. So if you liked The Immortal Reckoning, our hope is that you'll like The Summoning. With The Immortal Reckoning, we ended up having some groupies, people that would come multiple times, throughout the run, because, depending on what night you came, it would always be a little bit different, but this is a new show that is The Immortal Reckoning. You basically went on this adventure through this sort of history of haunted artifacts, and this show is more about communicating with ghosts. And the vampires of the Fangbang have actually invited you to help them because one of their vampires is an unethical vampire. See, our vampires are ethical vampires.
Yeah, because all the other vampires are ethical.
That's how they exist in San Francisco. They feed on the murderers and the rapists and the undesirables.
Yeah.
But one of their unethical vampires has gone rogue. And so the vampires basically need you, the humans, to come and help them because they're not able to talk to the spirit world because they're undead. So you as the human are the conduit between the ghosts and the vampires. And of course, all things go to hell, and you're thrown into this adventure, and you must go retrieve the severed head of the unethical vampire. That's all I'll say. But there will be nudity. There will be violence. There will be surprises. There will be, queerness, of course. There will be things that make you uncomfortable. You will get electrocuted. All that stuff will still be part of it.
Quite a disclaimer on these. Electrocution may happen to you. Yeah. So can anyone summon Peaches Christ this year?
No, Peaches. What's funny, what we've learned is Peaches is, as you know, FearWorm. Peaches' time is often reserved now for PR and media appearances and kind of selling tickets. But when the show's going on, I am typically running around as Joshua behind the scenes. And often I am thrown in, but you wouldn't necessarily know. What I love is when I'm thrown in and I'm in one of those Immortal Reckoning masks, performing a scene to a pre-recorded track, and Peaches fans are coming through and they have no idea that, it's me, dressed as the demon man, so you shouldn't come expecting to see Peaches unless you come to the Terror Ball, which is our big event, you know, on the Saturday night, which it's a party. It's a separate ticket, and that's hosted by Peaches.
So maybe you could do special nights, ways to make more money. Instead of $80 a head, it's $180 a head, but it's the entire night, guaranteed Peaches sightings, and you know, where you tour them through or something. You know.
Well, I mean,
you built it over all these years. You might as well make a buck on it.
You know what I want to do is, as people may know that, you know, I'm close friends and colleagues with Cassandra Peterson, and Elvira and Peaches have done, you know, a TV project together, and we've toured together, and Cassandra is in All About Evil. So there's part of me that's like, I want to get Elvira to the Terror Vault, you know, and charge a shit ton of money for Elvira and Peaches to host a night. But, you know, she's very busy around that time of year.
Yeah.
She keeps threatening to retire, but I don't believe her.
It's never going to happen, probably. Yeah.
Joshua, I know we've tiptoed kind of around this topic. I know this is a topic I know Ernest is also very curious about, and I've loved hearing. But coming out of the post-pandemic world, you know, what was that lesson? What was a lesson you took of, you know, we're in COVID, everything is shut down. I know you talked about, you know, going all out before, but like, what was really the thinking there, and what was the result of that?
So that's a great question, because I think for myself and David, we were really, of course, you know, bummed about the pandemic and how it was affecting things. And, you know, we had this momentum of doing Terror Vault for 2 years. And the second year we added an immersive, basically escape room experience that you walked through called Apocalypse. That was a zombie escape room experience. And we really enjoyed doing that. And then, of course, the pandemic happens and everything, you know, the rug is pulled out from underneath us and things come to a screeching halt. And so in 2020, we did create something called Screaming Telegrams, where you could hire one of our terrifying clowns to show up at your friend's, you know, apartment with, you know, social distance in mind, you know, and they perform a number and give gifts. But that was about all that we could pull off. So it gave us this time to really sit back and think about, you know, what we had done before. And I'll tell you, I think that David and I, as outrageous, queer, you know, drag, horror, you know, fans, the first couple years of Terror Vault, were trying to sort of sneak in stuff that was for us while keeping an eye on the haunted attraction world and what do people who love haunted attractions enjoy. And I think that worked. But with the Immortal Reckoning in 2021, we basically had this like fuck it attitude of, you know, life is short. We don't know if we're going to get to do this show, you know, ever. You know, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So we literally wrote the show. We just unapologetically us, you know, it was just wild and crazy. And, you know, there was a whole chunk of the show of an orphanage of nuns who worshiped a rabbit lord. Why? I don't know. You know, just whatever our imagination could cook up. And, you know, there was a vampire peep show that you went into with, you know, a jizz mopper. And, you know, I mean, it was outrageous. I mean, it was wild, you know, I mean, and I'm just scratching the surface. And partly we knew that we were risking maybe going too far, maybe just failing because we had made it so wild, and pushed, you know, all the elements that we kind of had been a little more reserved with. And what we found was, by leaning into storytelling, leaning into fantasy, leaning into weirdness, leaning into all those things that we were a little nervous to push, we had our biggest success yet. You know, it was critically the best received we've ever had. It's the first time we've had people coming to the show multiple times. You know, we had record-breaking attendances. So the lesson, I guess, as creatives was like, oh, you know what? We should just have followed our gut from the beginning. But, you know, I mean, there's a lot of money involved and a lot of people, you know, that you want to impress. And so I think we were nervous. Now I think we feel the pressure of like, will it be weird enough?
Well, yeah, now you set the bar,
Yeah.
right? So now you're going to have to like come up with every dream and every weird sequence you can think of. But I think it's a great lesson. I hope that our other clients are watching or will watch, or someday to be clients will watch too, because, you know, to really stand out. I mean, you're in an industry that's not exactly about being tame. And I mean, yours is, you know, kind of over the top compared to the, you know, shopping center kind of haunted attraction for kids. But let your imagination go wild. I mean, it's a creative industry, right? Instead of getting too hung up on what's the theme this year. Oh, zombies are real popular. Let's do zombies or whatever. Whatever you do, just like be known for it and be, you know, because this year you guys had such rave reviews last year.
Yeah.
You're going to sell tickets way out in advance. You could drop an extra 10, 15 bucks on a ticket and you're going to sell them just fine, because you have created this like identity in this brand. And it's because you let yourselves unknowingly or whatever, you know, because you told us, hey, we're just maybe just making this for us. So let's create, you know, let's
kind of.
And,
yeah.
And I think that's a great lesson that people, because I mean, people who are in this industry for the most part are pretty darn creative, you know, so let it, you know, let your flag fly, right? Go great. If it's worshiping bunnies or whatever it was, you know, just let it roll, right? Because that is kind of stuff you can recreate, make new every year, right? Even in a typical haunted attraction, you can, you know, change that, not that hard. And not just to shock people, right? Because yours is definitely shock value. A lot of places aren't shock value, but they are like creativity, be different, make somebody talk about it, right? So I think it's a great lesson. I mean, something I guess everybody knows, but I also know from working with so many on the marketing end that people are like, oh, but is my audience gonna like this, or is this? Well, maybe there's whole audiences you never even knew you would have if you just
that's definitely what we found was like us. I mean, you know, part of our charge is to sort of be creative, but also, you know, get a return on our investment, which I like, you know, so we have to recycle things. We recycle set pieces, and how do you recreate them so that they're not recognizable and create a new moment out of them? And, you know, we definitely with the Immortal Reckoning, we're leaning into everything that we wanted to do. And it was definitely a satisfying experience. So,
you know, the more unique you are, which includes a lot of times the building you're in, like you guys being in the Mint, or like you work with Penhurst Asylum or Eloise Asylum, or these places, a blood prison, right? People just want to go to these places anyway, and then make something truly unique. What happens to you is your geographic target goes from your town or, you know, 20-mile radius to 120-mile radius, right? And so your enthusiast, because how we do a lot of marketing is we'll say, for a typical haunted attraction, we'll say, I want everybody in this 20-mile radius that's in the age group that's interested in fun to hear about it. But I want everybody within 120 miles that's super fans that are interested in this to know, because they will drive, they'll fly in, they'll stay the night. Because I looked at your map, you had people coming in from LA, and you had, you know, a lot of people from all over the place. Then you can grow. They'll pay anything you charge, not anything, but they're willing, because it's this huge experience, you know? And and it's because it's so unique. Because if all you did was had just some jump scares and people in masks, you know, doing whatever, they're not going to come from further than 20 miles out, you know? But make it unique, which doesn't necessarily cost more money. It's what's in your head, what you can, you know.
Well, something that we definitely took note of was, of course, we watched the audience going through, you know, that's the best part. Like you build this thing, it takes so long, you know, and then you get to sit back and hopefully enjoy watching people enjoy it, you know, get scared. And so, of course, we're monitoring. And what was really interesting to me was that in other years where we relied less on storytelling, you know, the spectacular moment was pretty much the same throughout. You know, whatever it was, the audience came out and said, oh my God, that scene where this happened, you know, everyone loved that. With this show, everyone seemed to have a different favorite part. You know, it was like they were having different experiences and they were on this sort of storytelling journey. And the scenes that often got the most ooh-ah weren't necessarily the spectacle or the big scene that we thought it would be. It was where the storytelling revealed something So like in the finale, you find out that this person, without spoiling it, because we are going to try to mount the Immortal Reckoning in LA. That's what we're working on right now, is finding a space in LA. But there's a moment at the end that's a big reveal, and the audience would just gasp, and then they would applaud. And it was like, wow, this is just storytelling. We didn't have to wait. That thing that we spent thousands of dollars on, from Trans World or whatever, is getting kind of a nice response. But like this thing that's just me writing a script where the character's pulling off a disguise, they're applauding.
Yeah.
So I would say that for any haunter, especially with budget limitations or any limitations, that when you rely on a satisfying story, you always win. People love stories.
Yeah, that's the Sixth Sense. Is that the movie? Yeah, where it's at the end, the kids, you find out at the very end.
Yeah,
you haven't seen it by now. You're like, oh crap, he's dead. It's a ghost, right?
Yes.
You didn't take any money to make that, but if you'd never been told about that movie and you see it, it's the payoff for the whole movie, right?
Yes,
and it's fantastic. But there was no animatronics to make that happen,
right?
No giant broken sharks, Jaws, where it's like they made the whole thing happen with suspense and music because the shark broke, so yeah, it's fantastic. And everybody can't do that, right? You can't do that if you're pounding people through there 17 minutes at a time in groups of 10, but,
yeah, it would be a lot tougher for sure.
Yeah.
Although I have been to, knots and been to those mazes where there is a story element to some of those mazes. And if you're just going through and you're just worried about being scared, that's a very thrilling experience. But of course, the nerd in me, the producer in me, is like paying attention to every single little detail. And even in a 10-minute maze, you can squeeze in a little bit of a story, for those folks who are paying attention.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more of that. People are really wanting to get in there and show their creativity. And I don't know, maybe some of it's because a lot of people are getting really good at making their own props, making their own sets and things like that. So it doesn't cost quite as much anymore. So they're able to do it. Before we run out of time, I wanted to bring up the Fangbang again, your bar. Right?
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot of people have been talking a lot this year about, because we have our big events that are kind of maxed out on people, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you increase revenue? How do you keep people there longer? How do you, and we're finding that also people who attend, they don't want to go for 20 minutes. They want to go for 2 hours. They want to make a night out of it. And they're happy to spend $70, $100 a head if they have fun, right? So people are adding midways or axe throwing or escape rooms, Ferris wheels, whatever it is. Your bar is a great example of that. But I think it's even cooler because it has its own thing, right? It's a theme. It's not necessarily what your other theme is.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, tell me about the success of that and like repeat it or change it. Do you keep it that Fangbang every year or does it change or, what happens with that?
So we are going to bring it back because it was so successful, but we're going to also update it so that the gags are different. So, this past year, you might have been pulled into a vault by a vampire who may have given you a lap dance, and we had a stripper pole. We had different scenes and scenarios, so it will still be Fangbang. We also hired a professional DJ to build the whole sound design and soundtrack, who specializes in 80s goth new wave music. So the music was so great. And for an old,
didn't you do specialty drinks and stuff too, where they're all like made of real human blood and stuff like that?
Yes, exactly. So we worked with a mixologist, which is a big thing in San Francisco. And as you know, we had a special press release that went out just for, the bar culture and the media that covers restaurants and bars in the city. So I think for us, it was the right thing to do because we are looking for that sort of night out experience. And the bar was unquestionably always going to be part of this event. But we had never invested as much as we did in the Fangbang as far as theming, having characters, because it costs money. Let's face it. Like we're building props for this thing. We had, different, everything costs money. So before there was a bar at the event, it was spooky. It was called the Gold Bar. But we took a risk by investing a bunch of money and, building out this thing called Fangbang, and it totally paid off. So
you thought about opening it any other time? Could you open the bar like Friday the 13th or something, or some other event?
So we're looking into that. People have asked for that. So it was
that's like next Friday. So you're kind of a little late if you haven't started.
Yeah, not this upcoming Friday the 13th, but yes, people have asked for a Fangbang, maybe year-round thing. And then we've also
or a Valentine's party or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we may actually do because of our business partners, we have access to a lot of locations. So they actually manage event space. So we're not limited to just the San Francisco Mint with the business partnership that we're in. We actually have access to a lot of different spaces in San Francisco and beyond, and other cities.
You could do that as a pop-up that travels around the country.
Exactly.
And like a pop-up weekend where XYZ bar turns into the Fangbang for a day or something, or 2 days.
That's what we're looking into. Exactly that.
Okay, cool. Well, good idea that you already had. We constantly, it's like we've been saying for 9 years now, it's like you're building this great thing, you're building this brand, you get all these followers, and everybody does it for 5 weekends and stops. And it's like,
I know,
like how much money are we leaving on the table? How much excitement and brand building are we leaving? It's not just all about money, but face it, you're a business, right?
Well, I'll say this, because LA is a year-round spooky city. In an ideal world, what we'd love to do is have our flagship Halloween show happen in San Francisco, and then we would love to do a spring run in LA, and that would be an interesting new risk. But I think that doing a spring run of something like The Immortal Reckoning, which is fantasy and adventure and horror, I actually think LA has enough fans looking for something, year round, that we might succeed. So as soon as we get that space, and I think we're close, we'll be in touch with you guys to say, are we crazy or should we try this?
or Vegas, because a Vegas show, you have a new group of people come in that are wanting to press the limits of what their personal experiences are, and a new group of people every 2 days. Just like,
it's true. I just worry that in LA, because I already have a Peaches Christ Productions presence there, like we already have a Southern California. I know that there's an audience for the brand of weirdness that we do in LA. Vegas, I'm a little more like, ugh, like I mean, we could really freak people out in Las Vegas for sure.
Yeah. Or maybe you should do it like Branson. That'd fit right.
So before we get into questions, I do want to invite people. I think we've had like maybe one question come in, but go ahead and drop your questions in the comments below so we can get them over to Joshua. But I have a question on my own, and it's just talking about, just the wildness of Terrible, and you guys kind of just writing the show that you guys really wanted to see and just going all out for it. In that discussion and in that planning, was there anything that you were like, oh, no, can't do that? Is there anything too wild or too extreme or anything like that?
It's funny that you bring that up, because I would say that, I would say for The Immortal Reckoning, not really. And maybe that was just the result of the pandemic. And, but it's more, it's coming up more for this new one, The Summoning, where we've basically finished writing it for the most part. But I'll say this: one of us is pushing to make it more outrageous, and sometimes some of the suggestions I have get met with like, oh no, we cannot do that. No, I don't think we can do that. But I'll say this: I'm pretty much winning those arguments, so it might go too far. The Summoning might go too far. I mean, there's definitely some things in it that I don't want to give too much away, but we'll know pretty quickly. Yeah.
So maybe you should do one other night. It's the $180 ticket. That's all the scenes that were cut because they were too out of taste and bad taste to run.
You need to do a season one
director's cut.
Yeah. It's the Joshua cut. It's the director's cut of The Immortal Reckoning or The Summoning.
I'll also say that we do adjust, so it's not like once the show opens, if you come to the show at the beginning of the run, it's not necessarily the same. And, something I can speak to about that is like one of our actors, Jade, uses a wheelchair, and it's a very big motorized wheelchair. And so I had written the show, we had built the show, and then I said to Jade, like, oh, this scene right here would be great because we could bring you down in the elevator, you could sneak in this back door, we get you in the scene, you can perform, and then your break room is right over here. So it was very much an operational issue. The scene happened to be a schoolroom scene where a nun was torturing a student, and there was electrocution involved. And, I was learning as the show was rolling out that in some ways the scene could be considered ableist, because I'm learning as I go as a creator, but it is an ableist trope to take an adult who has a disability and present them as a child, right? So I actually was learning as we went, and I said to Jade, the actor, I'm like, how do we make this less ableist? And she said, well, one thing that, people in my, adults in my position never get to do is be sexual. So I went in and I rewrote that scene, and boy, did I make her sexual. And I'll tell you that the audience was so uncomfortable. And by working against the ableist tropes of taking an adult and, someone who's a smaller person and making them play a child and having them talk about gleefully masturbating and all of the things that we wrote into this scene, not only did it make the audience way more uncomfortable, the scene played so much better. And she has a claw on her chair, like literally a robotic claw, because she needs the hand movement because her hands are limited. And we would have that chair come flying across the room, and that claw, she could work it so it would reach out towards people's faces. Sometimes it would grab someone's neck. She's amazing. So sometimes, I'll admit that we open the show and there are problems, but we figure the problems out and kind of massage the show as we go along.
I'm gonna have to go see this show. Like every time we talk, I'm more and more sold of buying a plane ticket to San Francisco.
Do it.
So we did have a question on here.
Yeah, from Sue. So Sue Jones Gray. She says she was just popping in. She was a little late to the show, and she didn't know if we covered this or not. But with your actors, do you keep them in the same position throughout the season?
Good question. With COVID, it was our plan to do that as much as possible, because we didn't know when we were planning the show about the risk of contact infection as far as sharing costumes and even makeup stations. And also we were trying to create pods so that actors within a scene were kind of contained to those people. So we actually would have if you were in a particular scene or area, that's who you were in a green room with and getting ready with, so that we could hopefully. So I don't know. I would say that this year, but okay, to answer your question, as you know, if you run a haunt, you can try to do that. But the reality of it is, especially during a pandemic, you've got actors calling in left and right, because anyone who had symptoms, we would say, don't come to work. Luckily, we only had one actor test positive for COVID throughout the whole run. We have like 100 employees. So we only had one. But to contain it, we were trying to keep actors in the same role every night. But as you know, they don't love that. As the show goes on, they want to try other things. So as people did call in, we would move people around. And by the time we did the show, it was pretty obvious with what the scientists were putting out, that you weren't catching COVID by sharing costumes. So we did kind of loosen up a little bit. And of course we were spraying. I mean, our poor immortal reckoning masks. So much alcohol was put on those masks. I mean, so much paint was removed, but hey, you're doing a show during a pandemic, so you do the best you can.
Yeah. And then we had one other, it wasn't really a question, but it was just a comment. This is going back to when we were talking about the Fangbang, but our friend Abe was saying, hey, maybe run it like a private club that's Saturday nights only,
Yes. Well, so that is something we would love to do. The logistics are tough for us because the business partners we have, where the Fangbang was in the vaults of the Mint building. And for right now, there's actually an activation going on in the vaults. There's an NFT exhibit being presented by other producers, you know, where you wear these sort of giant goggles and go through this museum experience. So it really comes down to like, you know, can we do a pop-up in a space or time where they're not otherwise renting the building? And would our taking over the space be worth it? You know, because they, you know, it's all, you're always balanced against, you know, but what if Google wants to come in and rent the Mint for a party, which happens, you know, that sort of thing happens. So it's a tricky game.
Well, we don't really have any other questions or comments for you, Joshua. So I want to say thank you for joining Ernest and I on today's Wormhole. It's always fascinating talking to you and learning about all the crazy weirdness and just awesomeness that is Terror Vault. And I know I am super excited to kind of see and go down the road of this year's show, The Summoning. I'm going to talk Laura into going with me to San Francisco to see this show. But thanks for joining us today. If you don't mind, after our outro, if you can just hang around a little bit after we sign off,
Sure.
Grab a picture. But Ernest, thanks for joining me. You have any last comments about for Joshua here about the Terror Vault?
No, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to see what you guys are going to come up with. It's always something more than out of the box. It's crazy, and I you know, it's been an inspiration. I've shared it to a number of, you know, haunt owners because I want them to get. I hope they can get inspired by you like I have with the, you know, let your ideas run, you know. So thanks.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. And for all of you folks that, you know, are not yet clients, I just want to say we had a great experience working with you, and we're glad that we came on board and are part of the FearWorm family, and we are looking forward to this year as well.
Well, thanks. We are too. Appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate you saying that. We love having you as a client. I mean, it's just awesome. It's always great to have like that super unique client to like work on and get excited about, you know. Well, all right, everybody. Well, that's it for today's Wormhole. Thank you, Joshua, again for joining us, and stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we have another Wormhole coming up. But until then, have a great weekend. Bye.
If you have an interest in being a guest on the Wormhole or an idea for a topic of discussion, please email admin@fearworm.com.